Hello, welcome to Math for All, where we try to make math creative, curious, and inclusive for everyone. I'm Molly Vokey.
I'm Heidi Subnani. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are really excited to be speaking with our friend Dani about her new book, Math Problem Solving Through Small Group Instruction. And so this is a in real life friend. And so we always get excited to speak with some of the amazing women that we know and are lucky enough to be acquainted with in real life. If you've been following along with us this season, you will have noticed that all of our guests this season in season 5 are women or non-binary folk, and that is on purpose. And we're just really excited to have all of the amazing guests on that we have had this season. You can follow us on our Blue Sky, on our Facebook page, and on our YouTube channel if you would like to never miss an episode.
Yeah.
Also find us on our website. So that is mathforall.us.
Yes. And if controls are being really weird today, I don't know what's going on with that. And if you are looking for something for fractions, decimals, and integers, we see our book at Didex. It's called Math Activators, and it has short visual problems that you can do with your kids to uncover some misconceptions and invite conversation around those difficult topics. So we are going to be talking about Dani Jackson. No, we're not going to be talking about her. We're going to be talking to her because that would be rude. So we're going to be talking to her about explicit instruction on problem solving, which is exactly what her book is about. So let me introduce Dani. Dani Jackson is an elementary math curriculum coordinator in Frisco Independent School District. Dani has published a book called Math Problem Solving Through Small Group Instruction. She has also published many articles about mathematics instruction for Edutopia with a focus on positive feedback in the mathematics classroom, professional learning through lab site implementation, and small group instruction. She has her doctorate in curriculum and instruction. So let's bring her in. Hello.
Hi. I'm so excited.
Yeah, we're excited too, because last time we saw you, your book wasn't out yet.
It wasn't, and I wasn't done with my doctorate. So much has happened this last year.
I know, and we did see you over the summer.
Yeah, she's been very busy since the summer.
Yes.
So book published, doctorate done, check. So that's awesome. But if someone has not had the opportunity to meet you, or they haven't watched your previous time on the show, tell us a little bit about what is your math story.
Okay, so whenever I was growing up, I loved math. I had a great memory, so I could memorize all of those steps, and everybody would always say I was so good at math. Well, then whenever I got into teaching, I taught 5th grade math, and I loved it. But then also at the end of every year, they would say, whatever's left to teach, Dani can do it. So every year I switched subjects. So whenever I went to teaching reading and writing, it was not as concrete. Like there wasn't this is the right answer, black and white. And so I found myself like really trying to figure out what student behaviors would help me to know if a student really got summary or know if they really got character traits and their evidence and all of that. And I wanted to make it to where that it fit kind of like how I thought about math. And so I feel like that really helped me to figure out problem solving once I went back to teaching math. And then as I moved into a role of being an instructional coach, and this is my 7th year being a math curriculum coordinator, I found that every time that I was going to campuses, they would be like, we are struggling with problem solving. Our data around problem solving is not great. And so I remember this one session sitting with this campus, and we were just diving into their student work. And we were like, okay, let's just make an if then chart. Like, here's what the student is doing, here's what we think or what they're missing, and here's what we think would help them. And so we tried to make it like really simple. And as we started doing that, we started to see like shifts in student thinking. But then at a district level, we have these essential standards that we say every student must master before they go on to the next grade level. And our data was just not great. And we live in an affluent, like very parent involved district where that kids come a lot of the time on third base in a lot of our district. And so this became a really big part of my story because I really wanted to figure out, like, why is our data for problem solving in the 40 and 50% every year? And so that's whenever I started going to get my doctorate, because I was like, I have to figure this out. I want to know all the research and how it all kind of goes together to figure out why is problem solving so difficult. And really, it helped me to figure out, whenever I went and looked at all the research, it actually matched kind of all the action research that I had already done on campuses with teachers. And so then I felt like I was really making all of these connections and going back to like the first of my story where that I had to teach math and then reading and then math and then reading, and I would always go back and forth. I was able to really make some solid connections between the two. And that has really just helped me to dive deeper into why students across the world really are struggling with problem solving. And then also just thinking about like the world that kids are going to live in whenever they're adults and how important that problem solving truly is. So that's kind of where that my passion is and kind of how I got here.
Heidi, I feel like Heidi's immersed in both of those worlds where I am just solely in the math world. And so it's interesting the connections that you have made between the two, or as a result of one to help the other. And I think one of the things that Heidi's been talking a lot about, and actually frequently now because of BTC, is applying, what do you already know from teaching ELA, and how can we apply that? I think that's been a theme for a while, especially with small group instruction and workshop model, all of those things. So I can't wait to hear the rest.
Well, it's interesting to me. So as I was reading, and I'm not done with the book yet, so I won't speak to all of it, but as I was reading, some of the things that it made me think about is when we talk about how kids, so my area of research, as many people know, is within math anxiety. And so the idea of how our working memory is affected when we have math anxiety. And so often we put that solely on a computational thing, or because for many people it is often like, oh, it's about speed and flashcards and Mad Men, all of those things. And so we tie it to that. But if we think about it, their students' working memory can also be overloaded during problem solving. And so if they don't have a skill on how to take some of that information, or if they struggle both, like I did with dyslexia and some numeracy issues, then you have that idea of I'm working hard to decode, plus I'm working hard to problem solve, and then I'm adding a computational layer on top of that. And so when we begin to look at all of those different layers within problem solving and what that means, and how we approach that in the classroom, it's just a really interesting way to look at things for me.
Well, and what was really interesting is that during my capstone project for my doctorate, I got work samples from every student at a Title I campus. And I looked through all of their work, and then I also tied it to their DRA level, which is their reading level. And so it was so the kids that had reading comprehension errors or like problem solving errors, kind of how I did it by problem solving or by computational errors. And the ones that did have the problem solving errors, it was within 10% of the amount of students that were below reading level.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a strong correlation, and some of the barriers there too, especially especially third and fourth grade, like super heavy, second, third, and fourth, really heavy in problem solving with multi-step problems. And whenever you think about what these students are doing whenever they are solving problems and where they're at as readers, like it can get just really, really tricky really fast if they don't have some concrete skills or habits developed in how to strategically understand something that they don't understand yet.
Well, even just the idea of looking, I mean, before they even go to the problem, just looking at the problem, if you knowingly have reading issues, reading already makes you anxious. Just looking at the problem without reading and without attempting is already a level of anxiety that's contributing to then the process of solving it, the reading before you even try to solve it. So that is, I mean, decades and decades and decades old.
Well, and what was interesting too is I ended up creating this graphic because I couldn't figure out like how to piece it all without putting it all together, because really it all interacts together. So whenever we think about reading comprehension, math computation, and that self-efficacy piece, those all impact your working memory in different ways and at different levels. And it's going to depend on the problem, the student's reading level, like the complexity of the computation that's the problem is asking of them. And so all of those can impact the working memory in different ways and provide an easy opportunity for the student to have cognitive overload. And so a lot of what I learned was just so eye-opening that, you know, first of all, like one of the things, when we ask students to show their work, a lot of the time, I feel like in classrooms, it's a compliance piece. Because I said so, because I need to see how you're thinking. But really, if we can take a step back and help students become the ownership of their learning, or the owner of their learning, and have the ownership, whenever we tell them, this is how your brain works, just like whenever we have really allowed students to come alongside this journey with us on growth mindset and, you know, mistakes, help your brain learn. If we can help them understand that whenever you create an organized representation or model and label it with the context from the problem, you only have about 4 to 7 spots in your working memory, and all that information takes up all those spots. So if we can take that information and organize it on a piece of paper into a representation that makes sense, then they've offloaded all of that, and then they free up all this space in their working memory. And so if we can bring students into that conversation, so we have to also bring teachers into that conversation to understand how the brain works and how that students are going to be able to be more of a leader with, and they'll want to show their work because they'll understand why.
I love having I have not had conversations with kids about actual working memory, and that seems really interesting to me. That it seems like something like a teacher would know but not have a conversation with kids about, like would use that in their teaching to work around anxiety, problem solving, how to set up the classroom so that students are feeling confident or comfortable or whatever, but never have I thought about like really having those conversations with kids. Um, all right, let's talk about it. This is so exciting. I mean, it's reminding me of conversations with Liesel, the Conchate Lake. So
yeah, no, I definitely see a correlation between those two things, but I also want to, like, I don't know if address is the right word, but so when we think about explicit instruction, because sometimes that within the math community,
yes.
Please, people will then think, oh, well, they're not talking about like having a problem-based classroom. And so can you just talk a little bit about what you're specifically talking about and how that fits within that larger context?
Yes. Can I also add to that? Because I think sometimes what Heidi is saying is sometimes explicit instruction is translated into traditional teaching.
So, yes, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because that is such a good point that you have to, I am a huge believer in open-ended tasks and students showing their thinking. And so whenever students, the best piece of data that you can have, in my opinion, is a piece of student work that the problem is like just out of reach for a student, so that you can truly see where that their thinking breaks down. And so like in our district, I don't know if you've heard of exemplars. We do have exemplars, and those have been really, really good for this type of work, or even just a meaty problem is fine. But those just always have extra layers within them, and you can really see where a student's learning really breaks down. So you want to do that first before the explicit instruction. So kind of like whenever you think building thinking classrooms, but we want to see where a student can land independently as well. So whenever you're looking at a piece of student work, let's say that you have a student who they completed the first part of a problem, but they didn't completely finish it. There's a breakdown there where that we want to help the student to set up their work or create a habit that's going to help them go past that thinking on their own. So from start to finish on a problem, one of the biggest things that came from all of my research was thinking about how that there's like this continuum of how much that a student is thinking throughout a problem. And really the first or the most of the thinking happens at the beginning part of probably solving a problem, and they need to be doing a lot of things before that they ever actually do any computation. And I think that that's where that a lot of kids are not completing that piece. Like they're just kind of trying to pick out the numbers. They're not actually really thinking through the whole problem. So there's also another piece where that's like they have to do all this thinking. It's like 3/5 of the work. And then they do the organization and the solving in 1/5 of the work. And then a lot of our students, they don't do that fifth of the work, where that they then go back into the problem, reread it one more time and think, is my answer reasonable? But students aren't going to know that unless we actually teach them that, especially early on. You know, everything's being shoved down to make everything more and more complex. We're asking 8-year-olds to solve multi-step problems within 1,000. And so we need to provide them with some actual concrete actions that they can do on their own to be able to do that thinking independently. So does that answer your question?
It does, but I want to talk about it more. Go ahead, Heidi. Sorry.
No, well, because I think too, it's this idea of, and entitling your book, it's the problem solving through small group instruction. So this is like, the way I look at it in my mind too is giving teachers the tools for what are you doing when you have a group of students who are not there yet. And so really address, and it obviously can be applied to other situations as well, but and I could be using it wrong also, but the way I was thinking about it is like, okay, when I have a group of students, I need to know like, where are they in their kind of continuum? They've been working on this larger problem. We've reached frustration. We're no longer in, or we've reached a point where things are breaking down. What do I do as the teacher in order to help them be able to go back in the future and work through problems like that, or have this tool, if they don't have it yet, to help them access that problem? But I could be looking at that a little wrong.
No, that's exactly it. So I would love for like students to do the same problem. And then whenever you're thin slicing it, so in my book, it talks about 3 different ways that you could thin slice this data to where that then you're going to record, like where on this progression do students actually fall based on, and my progression is back here, but I'll just kind of point to it. So here are the behaviors that a student might be exhibiting. And then here are 3 lessons that are included in the book that the teacher could then teach these students that's going to help them move forward on the progression. So if students start, like let's say a student can't get started, they didn't understand the context, or they used the incorrect operation, then they need to be able to visualize what's actually happening. And we're just going to teach them that one small step. And I think that's sometimes too in small group instruction, or even in whole group instruction, where we get caught up is wanting them to master an entire problem in one sitting. And we end up holding them hostage at the teacher table, or even at the carpet, or for the whole lesson.
Yep.
And then you've lost everyone. So we want students to be able to move past this, but we want them to remember whenever they're in a lesson, I'm walking away with this skill. So the 3 skills that would be for visualizing is that they can act out the problem with math tools. They could remove the numbers or make them smaller so that they can just visualize what's happening with, maybe there are characters. What are they doing? What else do you notice? And then also they need to be able to retell the problem in their own words. And so often whenever I've been working with students, I have seen students, I'm like, okay, let's do visualize, and we'll go ahead and represent it with a strip diagram. And I move too fast, even just with those 2 things. They really struggle. A lot of students really struggle to verbalize what is actually happening in their own words. So many of them will try and go back and read the problem to you. It's like, no, hold on. So then that lesson might sound like, okay, so there's an anchor chart, and it has like a kinesthetic aspect to it, to where that they're going to put their finger on it and they're going to tell you, who are the characters? Move that to the next one. What are they doing? And then what else is important? And so just teaching them that they can name those things just to create a visual in their mind, or even draw a quick sketch of, okay, you know what? Draw a stick figure, name that person. Okay, so you see 8 eggs in each basket. That's what you just told me. Okay, so we're going to draw a circle with a little handle on it. We're going to put 8, and we're just going to put ... to, there were 12 baskets. All right, ... 12. And then just show them that you're offloading this information from just the story. Like in math, we have stories too. It's not just in reading that you have to visualize and make a movie in your mind. You also want to do that in math. And then the second part of the progression is representing what they visualize. One of the biggest things that came from us figuring out all of this, because we've worked with Katie is my counterpart at work. She's the other math coordinator, but we worked with hundreds of teachers and hundreds of students ourselves throughout this work. And one of the biggest ahas that we had was that representation, and not just, a lot of the time we're like, we have to teach so many representations. Why do we have to teach so many? And you know what? I'm going to let this student use a number line because that's their favorite. Although probably they wouldn't pick number line. They'd pick a place value chart or drawing sticks and dots. And, you know, that's their favorite strategy. So we're going to let them use that one. And I'm like, well, first of all, a model is different than a strategy. And the model is going to tell the story of the problem. We're going to label it. We're going to make these words or these numbers have meaning. A strategy is whenever you look at the numbers and you decide what is a good way to solve this based on what numbers are presented in the problem. So, what we noticed was that teachers and students didn't realize what representations that they could use to even match and what that meant to match your visualization. So for example, if you are thinking about a problem that says how many more, a comparison problem, what makes sense with that one is not a part whole or a strip diagram. That is like, it just is so hard to think about. Where would you put those numbers? But if we did a bar model or 2 number lines, it contributes to the comprehension of the problem. Or if we had like a whole bunch of stickers, like let's say they have bear stickers and cat stickers and dog stickers, it would make sense for us to maybe then use a base 10 pictorial to represent those 3 different amounts or values. So helping teachers understand that yes, we're teaching all of those different representations, but with a purpose. We're saying this problem would be great for a table. I can see a pattern and I can work up on a table to help me really comprehend what's going on with the context.
I love your chart back there, and I love that there are entry points and it tells teachers kind of exactly what to do. But one thing that I'm just struck by here is like your definition, not your definition, the way that you're talking about explicit instruction is entirely different from how some people view explicit instruction. And I want to make it clear for people to hear that what you're talking about is not front loading with everything that you know about this topic and telling them everything that you know, but seeing what they know first and then pinpointing what the explicit instruction needs to be. And in this case, you're largely talking about strategies for problem solving that require several steps of things to do in order to understand the problem versus going in and number grabbing and doing like the end thing first without any understanding of that problem.
Yes. And explicit instruction too, I feel like sometimes is equated to mimicking. And that is just not what's going on here. Like I was talking about earlier, how that we want students to be the owners of this and that we want them thinking. Like here's another example of something that is in my book. It's for goal setting or for students to use as a resource. So they might know where that they fall on this progression, where that they need to develop more habits. And let's say that it's representing their visualization. So they can flip there and and then they can see the lessons that they've learned about representing their visualization. And then there's a little graphic that was on their anchor chart from the lesson to help them remember what are some strategies that I can do if I'm stuck. And then they could use this for goal setting. They could use it just as a reference, but it puts them in the seat of what are some things that I can do whenever I get stuck? And then they're still the ones doing the thinking because the lesson might have been about how to use a strip diagram or how to create one and how to notice if it's a part or a whole. But then they're the ones that are taking that information and they are the ones creating that model. And I even tell teachers too, because small group instruction should be you get in and you get out, and the student is doing a lot of the thinking there too. The teacher doesn't have to do a lot. There's a tiny bit of explicit instruction with an anchor chart so that kids have something to refer back to. But then let's say you have this student work that they messed up on or that they didn't actually complete all the way to completion. you could use that piece of student work as a buy-in whenever, let's say, you do the teach part, then they're going to have an active engagement. You hand that piece of work back to the student, and then it proves to them, if you would have used this strategy, then you could have gotten the correct answer, or you could have moved past where you are right now, and gives them that buy-in that they're taking their own student work and they are using that specific concrete skill that they've been taught on their own. And they might need a little bit of guidance, but I always tell teachers during that time, get up and go pull another group somewhere else, because you want them to have the time and space to be able to think. And to there's this research article that I read during my doctorate that I keep going back to, and it has this great graphic that has where that kids start solving a problem and they ask themselves all of these questions along the way, like, can I actually do this? Am I on the right track? And it helps. It either creates, like, if they think they're not, like, that's when anxiety kind of starts. But if the teacher's going back to check in on them, we don't want them to get to the point where that they're frustrated, but we're creating tools that they can use and hopefully then become successful mathematicians on their own, or with just a little bit of support, and wean off that support so that they can go through that thinking process and have the confidence to make it all the way to the end.
I love it because it is so positively instilling independence in students, right? Trying to create students who are not dependent on the teacher, even though when you think of, when some teachers think of small group instruction, they might think of it being like a little show for themselves. Not that it's a show, but you know what I mean? They're preparing for what they're going to do, not what they're going to see happening in their group, which is a different perspective on what that small group is for. Or what am I assessing here? And then what is the explicit instruction that now needs to be given? And that takes a pretty savvy teacher to understand the difference between those things and how to do that on the fly. I mean, most of the time when you're at a small group, you know what the topic is, you know what the problem is, they're coming to you with work, or they're going to do something right in front of you. But a savvy teacher needs to think about that problem from start to finish. What are the strategies that can be used? What are the models that we can use for those particular strategies? And what model will I focus on for this particular strategy, given all of the things that we've done thus far? There's a lot that goes into that 5 to 10 minute small group.
Yeah.
Or longer, however.
Well, yeah, 5 to 10 minutes, maybe 15 if they're really struggling. But I think one of the things that keeps teachers from doing really purposeful small group instruction is because kind of what you just described, like they want it to be perfect and they want it to go a certain way. And really, if your lesson goes perfectly, then it's not hard enough. Like you don't have students at their instructional level. You have them at their independent level. So you want to make sure that actually it is messy. And I actually created this small group recording sheet like a couple months ago. I was working with a campus, and it has, like, you list the student names under the learning target, but then there are 3 little check boxes right next to each student. So you're either going to say that they got it and they don't need, or they mastered this skill, they need the skill, or they need this lesson again, or they need a prerequisite skill. We don't need to keep them there forever, just saying it over and over again. If we miss the mark on where we put them in a small group, that's okay. We're just going to compliment them on what they did really well. We're going to say, you know what? It takes several repetitions and practice to get really good at things as a mathematician. So we're going to keep working on this. Don't worry about it. We're going to get there. and just encourage them that like not everyone or not everything that you try, you're going to get on the first time. And, and it's okay. But I think sometimes it bruises the teacher's ego more than the student. And they're so worried that the student needs to leave feeling great and feeling like they accomplished something. This actually really helps students to feel that way, because if we are truly looking at a progression of learning and we're looking at behaviors, they should be able to either almost get what you're teaching them with that skill, or you're just going to do it again, or you could try a different lesson within that part of the progression, because maybe that specific skill wasn't the one that's going to work for them. Maybe removing the numbers or making the numbers smaller is just going to be too difficult for them. Okay, we tried it. It didn't work. So you know what? I'm just going to focus in on, they're going to act this out with math tools and as they retell it, or maybe then we're going to move on to retelling. But it just is messy. Like learning is messy, and we can't expect perfection or we'll never start,
Well, perfection is not real.
Right.
I've been striving for it my whole life, and I've seen very little.
Exactly. Well, and it's the learning piece of it that we want both our teachers to understand too. Like, I feel like sometimes when I'm in classrooms with teachers, they feel like they can't stop the little bit that they've given kids to work on, and they feel like they have to do all of it. I'm like, no, like we're just going to do this little bit and then release them to go work. And it's okay if we haven't, quote unquote, fixed all the, like, I'm not interested in fixing all the things.
Yeah.
Yet. Like, we're going to work on this little piece of it, and so that we can get comfortable and so that they see that that works versus kids tuning us out. Because I really do feel like kids will still, like, if it's too long before they get to go and do again.
Yeah.
Or you're just like walking them through and you want them to write down what that's like heading into mimicking. You're not teaching them to use the tool for their thinking.
Right.
And I love your chart, how it breaks everything down, because problem solving used to be do these 50 problems, and then there'll be those one or two, word problems on the bottom. And they were always called word problems because they had words. And, the expectation, you already knew what you were going to be doing. If you did 50 problems of division, well, obviously those problems are going to be about division. So why should I even bother to read it? There just was this level of expectation back then that we're just going to do a bunch of things that look exactly the same. And, we've gotten more savvy than that now, where it's not as predictable as it used to be. And problem solving has taken on a whole different life of its own, which is really needed in our society now, because the problems that we have to solve now are
huge,
being solved by AI or crazy, whatever the big
and
problems
complex.
are that we have. Very complex.
And that was and this may sound silly, but that was one of my biggest ahas in my first doctoral class. It was about the history of school, or the history of education. And I was like, okay, I was reading this book and it just hit me. It was talking about how that, how that schools were created in society to create what society needs. So if you lived in a farming community, you went to school to learn how to farm and the best ways to farm, and what everyone has learned is the new technology around farming. And then now whenever we were in school, there were a lot of procedures and a lot of just mimicking. And like you were talking about, we're going to do a whole page on division and we're going to follow these steps and we're going to be quiet while we do it. But there were a lot of data entry jobs and a lot of factory jobs whenever that was going on. And then when new math came, it's because there was a wave of you know what? Those skills aren't really needed anymore because we have machines that can do that. We have AI that can do a lot of those jobs now. And so I'm trying to get our teachers to understand that we are teaching the same math, but we're teaching math, but really we're teaching the soft skills through teaching math because they need to know that too. But really the primary reason for students to be at school is for them to learn how to problem solve, collaborate, critically think, all of these things that businesses are asking students to be able to come in and be able to do, because we have those big complex problems in society that they need that human element. And so it's important for us to not get caught up in, well, I learned it this way, so it must be fine for my students to learn it this way. But society is different now, and we have to move along and make sure that we are preparing our students for what they're going to face. And it's really special to think about whenever we think about the influence that we have on future generations in education and how that we can help them to solve really problems that are going to help us in our old age or help our kids, or just by helping them to learn how to think. And I always talk to teachers in our trainings too. And I know that you guys have been in a session of mine before and have people work out a tricky problem that's a third grade problem. And it's kind of insane what we're asking 8 and 9-year-olds to do. But when we do that and we actually realize what habits that we've developed because we've been doing it for so long, and we can really think through it through that lens of really it's explicit teaching of habits that we want students to start trying out, and how that we already have those habits. But a lot of the time we're expecting kids to be able to do something when they've only been multiplying for a couple months or dividing for a couple months. And we're expecting them to be experts at it by the end of 3rd grade, whenever that's just really not realistic.
I wish that, I wish that schools had better advertising for what their purpose is, because the way that you just described it is how many math teachers, at least because that's my population of people that I work with, do think about what their purpose is for school, right? We're here to teach kids to be critical thinkers, problem solvers, people who are thoughtful and collaborative and whatever. And then if the whole school kind of operated under that description, it would be a different place. It would be a different place if that was our sole purpose as a school district or county or whatever. It would be a different place.
Well, and the why behind it too, because I feel like at times certain pockets of the stakeholders will have that idea, but it's not a consistent through line.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
that's what I mean, right?
Yeah.
We need everyone from top to bottom to understand that, what you just said. Because everyone's teaching kids to do that. Phys ed teacher is teaching kids to be problem solvers, right? But they're doing it physically. And the art teacher is teaching kids to be creative, but there's also problem solving in that, right? And critical thinking about how am I going to get this to look the way that I want it to look. Like every teacher is really trying to teach that through their own subject area. So if we looked at education that way, it would be better. So I'm opening up my own school, and that's what it's going to be about.
Always the dream.
I definitely say that like every 3rd show. There's somebody that's going to open up a school under their own philosophy. So anyway, I love it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that would be huge.
Agreed. You have a book study coming up with your book that we're going to recommend that people check out and it's free book study that goes along, and you can really learn more, because I really do think this is one of those things, like, you got to do kind of a deep dive into, and all the resources are there. And it really gives you a kind of toolkit as a teacher for what your next steps can be in kind of your own problem solving journey. Because I think sometimes as teachers, we have misconceptions about, like, oh, they're using this strategy, but that's really a model, or vice versa. Getting really clear about what that is, so that we know what we're doing when we're working with students is really important. So how else can people learn about you?
Well, just piggybacking off of what you just were talking about with the book study, the book, one of the things that I wanted to make sure is that it was a book that had the why and the background, but it also had all of the resources that you can take with you. There are over 30 lessons and anchor charts within the book. There are also a lot of very explicit lessons about productive struggle and what students can do to get themselves out of that anxiety piece, or just things about, like, even like taking a walk to get their blood flowing, and like, what does that do with their body, and how does it reset, and getting a drink of water and taking a walk, and all of those things, just as part of them learning about themselves and as mathematicians, and the productive struggle that goes along with that. And so I wanted to make sure that all of those are included, and that you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on at my website. You can sign up for the book study there. I'm also on X. I don't get on that as much. I'm more on LinkedIn or on Facebook or Instagram. I have a Dani Jackson math page on Instagram as well. But I would love for people to come and join the book study and us learn about this together. So, yeah.
So fun. So fun. Well, we have really enjoyed talking about this, and we always really enjoy talking with you. So super fun. Thank you for giving us some of your time.
Of course. I can't wait to see you guys at our next conference.
I know. Hopefully we can make that happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It's always a treat.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, that was fun.
I know. Love it.
It's just like she's thought, like, from start to finish on everything. Mm-hmm. It's just so deep.
Yeah.
And I think this is what teachers need, right? For problem solving, because it's everywhere. This is what the problem is.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Well, and it's like very usable tools that don't take a really long time. And so I think it would be really beneficial for people to kind of take a look.
And what better way than a book study?
Exactly. So today is April 2nd, but in 2 weeks.
Oh gosh, I didn't change the date on that. Good Lord.
In
2 weeks.
We are going to, I believe it's 2 weeks. We are going to be talking with Ayanna Perry, and that'll be fantastic per usual. Let me just double check. And yes, the 16th.
Yes.
We will be speaking with her.
Losing it.
Hey.
Yeah, so that will be good. And as usual, our book can be found at Didex. And until we see you next time in 2 weeks, which is not April 2nd, we hope that you keep math creative, curious, and inclusive for everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good